She built her empire from the ground up. Every dollar earned, every barrier shattered. But when she walked into one of the most luxurious hotels in the city, they didn't see power, they saw skin. They denied her a room, and smiled while doing it. What they didn't know, she wouldn't leave angry. She'd leave with a plan. And when she came back, it wasn't to check in, it was to take over. The sun poured down in golden ribbons as Vanessa Michaels stepped out of her sleek black sedan, heels clicking against the polished stone of the Avalon Hotel's grand entrance. She wore a navy blue pantsuit, tailored to perfection, with a silk blouse the color of champagne. Her posture was effortless, shoulders back, chin high, a quiet confidence that had been earned, not gifted. Bethany, her longtime assistant, emerged from the other side, handling the luggage with swift precision. Behind them, the city buzzed with weekend energy, horns, footsteps, laughter drifting from sidewalk cafes. But Vanessa tuned it all out. This was supposed to be her pause, a rare week carved out between deals and deadlines, a private celebration of a new acquisition in Los Angeles and $1 billion valuation of her real estate empire. The Avalon wasn't just any hotel. It was the crown jewel of Baltimore hospitality, an institution where the elite gathered, where art and architecture collided in quiet luxury. Vanessa had stayed in finer places around the world, but there was something about Avalon's understated elegance that called to her. She had booked the penthouse suite months in advance, paid in full, confirmed twice. She reached the front steps and paused. Something tightened in her chest. Not fear, not quite suspicion, just that old familiar flicker. The invisible pause people made when they saw her walk into a room they didn't expect her in. "You confirmed everything, right?" she asked without turning. Bethany was already lifting a hand in reassurance. 3 emails. 2 phone calls. "You're the top VIP guest for the week." Vanessa nodded. Still, she felt it. She stepped into the lobby. It was beautiful. Crystal chandeliers. Soft jazz curling from ceiling speakers. The scent of jasmine and cedarwood dancing through the air. But none of it masked the shift that happened the moment the receptionist saw her. A flicker in the eyes. A pause in the smile. "Good afternoon," the woman said, all polished charm and tension hidden just beneath. "Welcome to the Avalon. May I help you?" Bethany stepped up, poised and confident. "Reservation under Vanessa Michaels, penthouse suite." The receptionist began typing. Vanessa watched the woman's fingers slow just slightly, watched her throat tighten as she stared at the screen a beat too long. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I'm not seeing a reservation under that name." Bethany frowned, leaning in. "We booked this months ago. Please check again." Vanessa didn't speak. She didn't have to. She had seen this before, in boardrooms, lobbies, even restaurants she now owned. It was never loud. It was never obvious, but it was always there. They didn't see power, they saw skin, and for the first time in weeks, Vanessa wasn't thinking about rest. She was thinking about strategy. The receptionist's fingers hovered above the keyboard, pretending to search. Her eyes flicked up at Vanessa, then back to the screen, then up again, each glance slower, more careful. "I'm sorry," she said with a practiced smile, "but I really don't see anything under that name." Bethany's voice remained professional, but her jaw had tightened. "Could you check under Michaels Holdings, or Vanessa R. Michaels?" "We confirmed the penthouse suite." Twice. Still typing. Still stalling. Vanessa stood perfectly still, her hands folded in front of her. Not cold, not angry, just watching, absorbing. "Let me get my manager," the receptionist said, already reaching for the phone. Across the room, the hum of wealth continued uninterrupted. Couples sipping champagne, bellhops gliding past with carted luggage, a jazz trio playing something soft and expensive in the corner. And then he appeared. Robert Stevens. Grey suit, polished shoes, a name tag that sparkled more than it should. He moved toward them with authority, and the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Miss Michaels," he said, his voice honeyed. "I understand there's been some confusion." "There shouldn't be," Vanessa replied evenly. "I booked the penthouse suite. My assistant confirmed it." Robert gave a short, sympathetic laugh, the kind meant to end conversations before they began. "Yes, well, sometimes these systems aren't perfect. I'm afraid we're fully booked. There's been a mix-up." Bethany stepped forward, A mix-up. She's your top-tier guest. You had a fruit basket sent to her office last week. He didn't look at Bethany, only at Vanessa. I'm truly sorry, he said. But unfortunately, we don't have any sweets available at this time. I do hope you'll consider us again in the future. The words were smooth, civil, legal proof. But the message was clear. Vanessa held his gaze for a long moment. Not in anger, but in understanding. She had seen that smile before. Worn it, even when she had to. It was the kind of smile built to keep doors closed without ever touching the handle. I see, she said finally. Bethany opened her mouth again, but Vanessa touched her arm lightly. No need to argue, she said. She turned to the manager. Thank you for your time. And with that, she walked away, past the velvet ropes, past the chandeliers, past the false welcome, back onto the marble sidewalk where the sun hadn't stopped shining. Bethany followed, furious. This is insane, she hissed. We should call the press, post about it, blow this place up. Vanessa didn't stop walking. Not yet, she said calmly. They didn't just make a mistake. Bethany narrowed her eyes. Then what do we do? Vanessa turned, her voice low but certain. We buy the mistake. Outside, the wind shifted slightly, brushing Vanessa's suit jacket as if the city itself had leaned in to listen. She stood for a moment at the curb, eyes on the Avalon's stone facade, lips pressed into a quiet line. She didn't speak, didn't curse, didn't fume. There was no slammed fist, no dramatic turn for the cameras that weren't there. Just stillness. Bethany hovered close, still simmering. Vanessa, you can't just let this go. But Vanessa wasn't letting anything go. She was holding it, cataloguing every detail. The way Robert's smile skipped sincerity. The receptionist's delay. The patrons watching them without watching them, too comfortable in their certainty that whatever had just happened wasn't worth their attention. She slipped her phone from her coat pocket, thumbed open her calendar, and deleted the block of time labeled rest. A new block took its place. Strategy. Bethany glanced over, catching a glimpse. We're not resting? We're adjusting, Vanessa said, her voice calm. I've been underestimated before, but never this openly, not at this level. They hailed a car, slid into the back seat. The ride to the alternate hotel was quiet. Vanessa stared out the window, not at the traffic, but through it. Her mind was already moving, backtracking, mapping, reconstructing a plan that had shifted without warning. Not out of emotion, out of instinct. Years of building had sharpened her reactions into something stronger than rage. Precision. When they checked in at the backup hotel, the difference was immediate. Smiles that reached eyes, a suite that was ready, a handwritten welcome note on the table. Vanessa thanked the front desk softly, then headed upstairs. Bethany closed the door behind them, arms folded. So what now? Call legal, go public. Vanessa took off her blazer, hung it neatly over the chair, and opened her laptop. No, she said. Not yet. She opened a folder titled Acquisitions. In progress. Her fingers flew across the keys, pulling up property records, business news, and quiet financial filings. She paused only once, staring at the name on the screen. Avalon Hospitality Group. Bethany leaned over her shoulder. You're not serious. Vanessa's eyes didn't leave the screen. Oh, I'm very serious. Bethany exhaled. They don't even know who you are. Vanessa finally looked up. Her voice was soft but cut like glass. No, but they will. And just like that, the silence she left behind at the Avalon began to grow, not as an echo dot, but as a warning. The suite smelled of bergamot and linen, clean, unbothered, untouched by insult. Vanessa moved through the room with quiet control, setting her laptop on the walnut desk, pulling back the curtains to a city skyline, lit in soft amber. She didn't speak. Not yet. Her silence wasn't discomfort. It was concentration. Bethany, on the other hand, was pacing. They humiliated you, she snapped. In public. In front of their staff. In front of me. What are we just supposed to let that slide? Vanessa didn't look up. No, she said. We're going to respond. Bethany stopped, waiting for the storm. But Vanessa only sat down, opened her laptop, and began typing. No press release. No social media post. No hashtags. She continued. They're expecting outrage. They're prepared for it. That's not what we're giving them. Bethany blinked. Then what are we giving them? Vanessa's fingers paused above the keyboard. She turned her head slightly, calm as a still lake. "We don't fight fire with fire," she said. "We buy the building." Bethany stared. "Wait, are you saying you want to?" "Yes." "You're serious?" Vanessa turned back to the screen. "I don't play pretend, Beth." There was a sharpness beneath the surface now. Not anger, intention. Bethany dropped into the armchair across from her. "You're unbelievable," she muttered, half in awe, half in disbelief. "No," Vanessa said. "I'm prepared." She opened the Avalon's property file, tracing through public records, ownership structures, old news articles tucked between glowing reviews. Behind the glamour and polished PR, she found something else. Debt, quiet lawsuits, a dip in occupancy after a botched remodel last spring. Bethany leaned in. "They're bleeding." Vanessa nodded, privately. "But enough for pressure. You've been scouting acquisitions lately anyway." "I was looking at West Coast resorts," Vanessa said, tapping the side of her laptop. "But sometimes opportunity shifts zip codes." She kept digging. Lines of names, shell companies, secondary investors, all of it tucked beneath luxury branding and curated exclusivity. And somewhere in the middle of it all, an opening. By midnight, Vanessa had written 3 emails. One to her attorney, one to a private equity contact, and one to herself, a list of points to raise in the morning call. Bethany finally broke the silence. "You really think they'll sell?" Vanessa closed her laptop. The city still shimmered outside the window. "They'll sell," she said. "Eventually. And when they do," Vanessa smiled faintly, "I won't be checking in." She turned off the light. Let the city burn outside her window. The war had already started. They just didn't know they'd already lost. The next morning, Vanessa was already dressed before the sun broke the horizon. She sat at the table by the window, coffee untouched, eyes sharp as she scanned page after page of financial data, public records, lien disclosures, quiet settlements. It was all there, hidden in plain sight, if you knew where to look. And Vanessa did. Bethany rubbed sleep from her eyes as she stepped out of the adjoining room, still in a robe. "You've been up all night." Vanessa didn't look away from the screen. "Not all night, just long enough to know they're more fragile than they pretend to be." She turned the laptop toward her. "The Avalon hasn't turned a real profit in 3 years. Their last renovation ran double its budget. Bookings are down. 2 major events cancelled. And their holding company. It's leveraged across 6 underperforming properties." Bethany whistled low. "So the crown jewels got cracks." Vanessa nodded once. "They're covering it with polish and politeness. But the foundation's crumbling." She clicked to another document. A court docket. A pending discrimination lawsuit from a former employee, quietly sealed but not invisible. Vanessa made a note. "Bad press. If it surfaces," she said softly, "which makes them more likely to sell quietly." Discreetly, Bethany leaned over her shoulder. "You're already planning your offer?" Vanessa gave the smallest smile. "I'm planning their escape route. I just happen to be the one holding the map." She opened a spreadsheet. Line items detailed potential costs for acquisition, legal transfer, restructuring, and a soft rebrand. It wasn't just personal anymore. It was viable, strategic. Bethany sat down across from her. "Why not just go public, force them into damage control?" Vanessa looked up. Her eyes were calm, but something colder sat just beneath. "Because I'm not trying to embarrass them. I'm trying to own them." Bethany nodded slowly. "They won't see it coming." "They won't see me," Vanessa said. "Not until they're signing the papers." By noon, Vanessa had made 4 calls. One to her legal counsel, one to a private buyer she'd worked with before, one to a friend who used to sit on Avalon's regional board, and one, quietly, to an acquisitions broker with access to the company's current valuation. Every piece fit. Debt, decline, desperation. The Avalon wasn't untouchable. It was vulnerable, and Vanessa didn't need a lawsuit to prove a point. She didn't need headlines or a camera crew. She needed a contract. And once it was signed, once her name was on the deed instead of just the guest list, no one would be able to erase it, or her. She closed the laptop, looked out at the city again, not as a visitor, but as a woman already rewriting the skyline. 3 weeks later, the papers were signed on a rainy Tuesday morning. No press release, no ribbon cutting, just 3 signatures, 2 wire transfers, and a quiet handshake inside a glass conference room overlooking the harbor. Vanessa didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her satisfaction came in silence. Bethany sat beside her, flipping through the final contract one last time. "It's official," she said, almost in disbelief. "You own the Avalon." Vanessa nodded once. "Not just yet. Not until they feel it." And that was the plan. The deal had been structured through a holding company, one with no ties to her name, at least not on paper. The Avalon staff still answered to the same emails. Payroll came from the same system. The front desk still greeted guests beneath the same chandelier. But the ownership, completely different. Vanessa had insisted on a transition period. 2 weeks of silence before the change would be announced. 2 weeks where she could observe, unfiltered, walk the halls, watch the patterns, listen. Power didn't need to announce itself. It just needed to walk in like it belonged. She spent those days not as a guest, but as a presence, slipping into the lobby unnoticed, noting how often people like her were ignored or delayed, watching Robert, the manager, laugh with certain guests and stiffen with others, tracking where the warmth ended and where the polite exclusion began. Bethany joined her on most days, though she was still adjusting to the quiet of it all. "You're playing a long game," she whispered one morning, as they sat in the cafe across the street, watching the valet rotate luxury cars. Vanessa sipped her tea without looking up. "I always do." On the 10th day she walked past the front desk again. The same receptionist looked up, blinked, then straightened quickly, something vaguely nervous flickering in her posture. Vanessa said nothing. She didn't have to. Behind the scenes, the HR files were already being reviewed. Vendor contracts were under audit. The books were being cleaned. A new head of guest experience was scheduled to start the following Monday. The building still bore the same name, but the soul of the Avalon, it was already shifting. At night, Vanessa sat in the suite that was once denied to her, now booked permanently under a corporate rate tied to her own holding company. She walked barefoot across the marble floor, paused at the balcony, and looked down at the entrance where she'd once been turned away. No spotlight, no fanfare, just stillness. And this time it was hers. The morning air was crisp, with a low fog brushing the tops of the buildings like a secret. Vanessa stepped out of the black town car and adjusted the lapels of her cream coat. No press, no entourage. Just her, a leather folder tucked under one arm, and the quiet certainty of a woman who no longer needed to announce herself. The Avalon stood just as it had before, grand, elegant, proud. But this time, the marble underfoot didn't feel like borrowed space. It felt owned. She walked through the revolving door. The lobby buzzed with its usual hum, suitcases rolling, voices low, jazz curling from hidden speakers. But as she approached the front desk, time seemed to still. The receptionist looked up. Recognition hit first, then confusion, then dread. Her hands fumbled on the keyboard. Good morning," she stammered. "Do you have a reservation?" Vanessa offered a small, polite smile. Not cruel, not smug, just controlled. "No," she said smoothly. "I'm not checking in." The receptionist blinked. "Oh, are you here to meet someone?" Vanessa's gaze didn't waver. "Yes, the management team." From the corner Robert appeared, drawn by the tension or maybe the whisper someone had already passed along. He moved quickly, still in his signature grey suit, still performing calm authority. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice wrapped in professionalism. Vanessa turned to face him fully. For a moment, he didn't recognize her. Not truly. Then he did. The flicker of memory. The polite smile tightening. His posture shifting. "You might remember me," she said softly. "You turned me away not long ago." Robert opened his mouth, an apology already forming. But Vanessa raised a hand gently. "Don't. This isn't about that." She reached into her folder and pulled out a slim single-page memo. No letterhead, no flourish, just truth. "I'm the new owner." The words landed like a dropped glass in a quiet room. Robert stared at the paper, then back at her. The receptionist took a half step back, her face losing all color. Vanessa didn't wait for a response. She walked past the front desk, past the polished floors and curated art, and straight toward the executive wing, where a meeting room had already been prepared. No gloating, no scenes. She wasn't there for payback. She was there for business. Behind her, the lobby resumed its rhythm, slightly quieter now, a shift in energy, not quite panic, but something close. And as Vanessa disappeared behind the frosted glass doors, one thing became clear. The woman they had tried to keep out had just stepped all the way in. The conference room was quiet, its long mahogany table polished to a shine that reflected the morning light. Bottled water sat untouched. The air felt too still, like even the walls were waiting for what came next. Robert entered a beat too late. His smile was rehearsed, a notch too wide. "Miss Michaels," he began, voice smooth but thin around the edges. "I want to start by saying how thrilled we are to have you on board." Vanessa said nothing, just gestured to the chair across from her. He sat, adjusted his tie, cleared his throat. "I of course had no idea who you were that day. We follow protocol, and the booking didn't appear in our system." "You're not here to explain," Vanessa said softly, interrupting without raising her voice. "You're here to listen." Robert's mouth stayed slightly open, as if another excuse had been halfway out. Vanessa opened the folder in front of her and slid a single page across the table. "A new operating protocol. Non-negotiable. This hotel will no longer operate on appearance, assumption, or unspoken codes of exclusion," she said. "We're restructuring hiring practices, retraining staff, and bringing in third-party oversight." Robert glanced at the page, blinking. "Of course, yes, that sounds progressive." "It's overdue," she corrected. He straightened in his seat, trying to recover. "You know, we've always valued excellence and elegance here. That exclusivity is part of what defines the Avalon." Vanessa leaned in slightly. "Exclusivity is not the same as discrimination," she said. "And if that's how you've interpreted luxury, Robert, then perhaps this isn't the right environment for you anymore." The silence between them stretched. His face shifted offense, then panic, then something else. "Reality. You're replacing me?" he asked quietly. "I'm giving you a choice," Vanessa replied. "Adapt to the new standards, or step aside." She didn't say it with venom. There was no raised voice, no anger, just clarity. Robert nodded slowly, swallowing whatever pride he had left. "I understand." Vanessa closed the folder and stood. "This hotel will become a model of what hospitality should be, not just for the wealthy, but for the worthy." He didn't respond, not immediately. As she moved toward the door, she paused just long enough to glance back. "This isn't personal," she said, "but it is permanent." And then she left him there, sitting under a chandelier that no longer reflected the old Avalon. The man who once held the keys was now holding a decision, and the woman they tried to turn away, she now held the future. The changes didn't happen overnight. They happened with purpose. Vanessa walked the halls daily, not as a figurehead, but as a presence. She spoke with housekeeping, ate lunch with the front desk team, sat in on interviews and hiring panels. Not one detail escaped her attention. Not one voice went unheard. The first shift came quietly. Job postings rewritten, no longer favoring familiarity over fairness. Then came the training, not the kind you breeze through in a video. Real conversations, real accountability, facilitated by experts who didn't flinch at discomfort. "Respect isn't a policy," Vanessa told the new team during their first all-staff meeting. "It's a habit, and this hotel is going to practice it until it becomes second nature." The room had gone still, not because of fear, but because they believed her. Robert had chosen to resign. His nameplate was gone. In his place, Vanessa appointed a general manager who had once been passed over for not having the right look. Now she stood at the helm, calm, capable, quietly revolutionary. The Avalon's culture began to shift. Uniforms were updated, modern, inclusive, respectful of faith and identity. Vendor contracts were renegotiated, prioritizing partnerships with local, minority-owned businesses. Even the welcome package in each suite was reimagined. Fresh flowers, handwritten cards, and a note that read, "You belong here." It wasn't just branding, it was truth. Bethany watched the transformation unfold with a mix of awe and exhaustion. "You really meant every word." Vanessa smiled as she flipped through feedback reports. "I always mean what I say, but this time, I'm making sure it echoes." Word spread quickly. Guests who had long felt unwelcome now walked through the doors with ease. Some of the old clientele faded out, uncomfortable with the new tone. Vanessa didn't chase them. She didn't need to. Because in their place came something stronger, loyalty built on principle, not pretense. One afternoon, as Vanessa passed the front desk, a young bellhop stopped her. Nervous, eyes bright. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said. "This is the first job where I've felt like myself. Like, I don't have to shrink." Vanessa nodded, holding his gaze. "Don't ever shrink," she said. "Not here, not anywhere." He smiled and returned to work, shoulders a little straighter. The chandeliers still sparkled, the jazz still played, the Avalon still offered elegance, but now, it offered dignity too. Vanessa didn't change the soul of the hotel by tearing it down. She changed it by reminding it what hospitality was always supposed to be. It started with a tweet, just a blurry photo. Vanessa standing near the lobby's glass doors, speaking with a group of staff. No filters, no context.
Just a caption.
She owns the place now, and it shows. By morning, it had been shared 20,000 times. By afternoon, the calls started coming in. News outlets, podcasts, magazines that had never once featured her during her rise, were now scrambling to get her on record. Everyone wanted the story. Vanessa declined most of them. She didn't need airtime. But then The Atlantic called. Then Forbes. Then Essence. She chose her interviews carefully. Not for profile, but for principle.
She told the story.
Yes, but she framed it differently. "This isn't about revenge," she said during a live segment. "It's about repair, about reimagining what legacy looks like when you've been told you don't belong." The host nodded, stunned into silence. That same week, the front page of the Baltimore Sun ran the headline, "Billionaire turns hotel that rejected her into symbol of justice." Below it, a photo of Vanessa calm, composed, standing beneath the same chandelier she once walked past in silence. Bethany dropped the paper on the breakfast table at the suite. "You're everywhere," she said. "TV, radio, LinkedIn's calling you a blueprint." Vanessa smiled faintly. "They're late. The blueprint's been here." But she wasn't chasing applause. She was chasing clarity. Emails flooded in, not just from supporters, from workers in the industry, young professionals, aspiring founders, hotel staff across the country. "You made me feel visible. I've never seen someone like me at the top. How do I build what you've built?" Vanessa read every one. "This is what they don't understand," she said one evening, gazing out over the city skyline. They thought the story ended at the front desk. But the front desk was only the prologue. By now, the Avalon had become more than a hotel. It had become a case study. College business courses were already rewriting lectures to include her acquisition. Diversity and hospitality seminars were referencing her model. Inside the Avalon, nothing looked broken anymore, but everything had changed. The staff carried themselves differently. Guests returned with friends. The energy had shifted from curated to authentic. Vanessa's phone buzzed again. Another invitation to speak. A summit on racial equity in enterprise. She stared at the screen for a moment, then locked it. She didn't need to speak on stages to be heard. She just needed to keep building. And quietly, the industry was beginning to follow her lead. The office wasn't large. It didn't need to be. Vanessa stood near the floor-to-ceiling window, one hand resting lightly on the glass as the Baltimore skyline stretched out before her. Steel, brick and sky woven together in the soft glow of late afternoon. Behind her, the room was quiet. No clutter, no awards on the wall. Just a single photograph on the shelf. A much younger Vanessa, maybe 16, standing outside a construction site with a hard hat 2 sizes too big, and eyes that already knew what they wanted. Bethany knocked gently before entering, holding a binder. "Final numbers from Q2, she said. "The Avalon's occupancy rate just past 90%. Vanessa didn't turn. "Good. And the equity partners are asking if you're planning to expand into DC next." She was quiet for a long moment. "Then tell them yes." Bethany smiled. "I already did." The door clicked shut again, leaving Vanessa alone with the city and her thoughts. She wasn't thinking about profits, or headlines, or the polished phrases the media liked to use. Trailblazer, powerhouse, disruptor. She thought about the look on that receptionist's face the moment she said the words. "I'm the new owner," not because it hurt, but because it revealed everything. She thought about the bellhop who said he finally felt seen, about the guests who walked in now without shrinking themselves, About the managers at other hotels who had started calling to ask, not out of obligation, but curiosity, how she built what she built. And she thought about the girls. The ones watching quietly. The ones no one thought to mentor. The ones who carried themselves with more strength than their age should have required. The ones told, directly or through silence, that there were rooms they'd never belong in. Vanessa traced the skyline with her eyes. The Avalon was just the beginning. She already had her sights on 2 more acquisitions, both historic, both known for prestige, and both with leadership boards that hadn't changed faces in decades. She wasn't coming for revenge. She was coming for balance, for rebuilding an industry not around marble floors and silent judgments, but around inclusion that didn't ask people to shrink to fit in. Her phone buzzed again. A text from a 12-year-old girl in Atlanta, who had watched her interview online. "One day I want to own buildings too." Vanessa smiled. The work was far from over, but a new foundation had been poured, and it was stronger than steel. This was legacy. Not a name etched in stone, but a door held open for the next one through. If you believe dignity should never be denied, and power doesn't need to shout to be felt, then share this story. For every little girl told she doesn't belong, for every quiet victory that rewrites the rules. And if you're ready for more stories that empower, inspire and expose, subscribe, comment below, and keep building the legacy with us.